Story 1. I'm not in law enforcement or fire rescue or anything like that. I'm a plumbing contractor and got a call from some homeowners about a bad smell in their house. They were trying to sell the house but were having no luck because prospective homeowners noticed the odor when they entered the master bath. I show up at the site thinking it's a broken vent or main sewer line, and the smell is sewer gas or raw sewage coming up from the crawl space. When I entered the home, I couldn't smell anything until I got in the master bathroom, and then it hit me. It wasn't quite a sewer gas smell. It smelled more like raw sewage mixed with grease trap grease that had been sitting out in the sun on a 90-degree day. I asked the homeowner how to get in the crawl space as I didn't see an access from the outside. The man said he didn't know and had never had to go down there. I started searching the bedroom closets for an access and found one in one of the homeowner's daughter's rooms. It was under the carpet and screwed and nailed shut. Here's where it gets freaky. The little girl, whose room the crawl access was in, was watching me as I took up the carpet and was taking out the nails and screws from the access door. She turns to her dad, when I was almost done removing the screws and nails, and frantically starts telling him not to let him out. The dad assumed she was talking about not letting me out and started telling her I wasn't leaving, I was just going under the house. She literally broke down crying and screaming. The homeowner apologized and took her out of the room. When I finally got the access door open, the terrible smell about knocked me out. It was terrible. I climbed down in the crawl and worked my way towards the master bath. There was no broken main, no broken vent, no sewage on the ground. In the corner there was a large black trash bag, and when I opened it, it was full of whole animal carcasses and old bottles of embalming fluid. It freaked me the heck out. I hauled ass out of there and told them they'll need to call some kind of hazardous waste disposal company to come in and get rid of whatever the hell was down there. I didn't even charge the people, I just got the hell out. A few weeks later, I got a call from the same people wanting some minor repairs done in the kitchen so they could sell. The homeowner said after I left, the smell completely went away and they had a handyman remove the bag of animal bones. They said that had to be the cause of the smell, but it had gone away before the bag was removed, and last time I checked, bones don't smell like that. Never found out what the little girl meant by let him out, and never went back there. Story 2. I learned a long time ago that skinwalkers are not something to be trifled with. In fact, quite the opposite. They are terrifying and dangerous. My encounter happened in Oklahoma a few years back. I was working for this construction crew and we'd been hired to do some work on this cabin some rich dick wanted renovating. Simple enough work in that it was just some new inner walls, new insulation, a new roof, and some solar panels for off-grid power. Other than being in the middle of literal nowhere, it wasn't difficult work. It was 2 weeks' work and solid pay, so it wasn't much of an issue with us. That came on the third day of work. One of the guys on the crew, Jamie, was already there. That was odd on its own since he was always late, but what made it even odder was the way he was acting throughout the day. Then he just upped and disappeared around lunchtime. Again, that itself was odd since he normally worked through lunch, so we didn't expect him to just disappear. Me and another one from the crew, Barry, went off to find him while the rest got on with the work. We went to the trucks but couldn't find him, and we were about to make our way back to the shed when Barry pointed something out. There was a trail of blood leading from the trucks into the forest. Obviously, we thought something happened to Jamie and followed the trail. It didn't take us long to find out what happened to him. We found his body. From the looks of it, he had been there all night. Barry almost threw up at the smell of the body. I was about to tell him to run back and get the others when I heard Jake call out to us. But he was lying dead in front of us. Then Barry screamed, and I saw why. Standing in front of us was some twisted version of Jamie. It didn't look right or natural. It had his face, but it was all pasty and flaking off. There were horns on its head, and it had this open smile that showed fangs rather than normal human teeth. It was horrifying. It just stood there, staring at us while drooling. Neither of us are scared easily, but both me and Barry started running the moment it started walking towards us. Not 15 minutes we returned with the rest of the crew and a few guns we kept in the trucks. That thing was still there, eating Jamie. I was carrying one of the guns, as was our boss. We both fired a few rounds at it, but it didn't even notice them. Then the chief said something I couldn't quite make out before firing another shot. It was hit and went down before getting up, howling/screaming at us before running away on all fours. It was still wearing his face through all of this. Jamie had been torn to shreds, and his death was eventually ruled as an animal attack. But to this day, I wouldn't consider whatever that thing was an animal. I'd later ask the chief what he said before taking the shot, but he would refuse to ever talk about it. We managed to complete the renovations without any more issues, but I later found out that the guy who owned it went missing during a stay at the cabin. I never want to see that thing again. Story 3. I'm a psychiatrist by profession, and over the course of my career, I have dealt with many people who have strange and unusual problems. However, one case in particular disturbed me more than any other. There was a family of 3 who lived next door to me. They were a married couple in their late 50s, and they had a son who was about 30 years old. The son was what we call in Japan a hikikomori. Somebody who is introverted, reclusive, and isolated, someone who has withdrawn from social contact. We never saw the son. People who are hikikomori usually lock themselves away in their rooms and avoid others. I didn't hear about his condition directly from his parents. I assumed they didn't want to discuss it. In Japan, people are very concerned about appearances, and having a son who is hikikomori is an embarrassment. As the days passed, their son went out less and less. Eventually, he never came out of the house at all. Every night, from his bedroom window, the furious voice of his mother could be heard screaming and shouting at him. Whenever I met the poor woman, she smiled and said hello, but the strain was showing in her face. She became pale and haggard. It had been almost 6 years since anyone had seen the son. One day, the father knocked on my door and asked me to come to his house. He knew I was a psychiatrist, and since we were neighbors, I decided to do what I could to help the family. When we got to the front door, the mother was there waiting for us. She led me upstairs to her son's room. She banged on the door with her fist and shouted, "We're coming in." Then she burst into the room and shrieked, "Are you going to sleep forever? Get up, you lazy good-for-nothing." Before I knew what was happening, she grabbed a golf club and started beating the sleeping figure under the covers. For a moment, I was struck dumb as she rained down blow after blow. Then I sprang into action, grabbing the golf club and wrestling her out of the room. I hurried back inside to check on her son's injuries, but when I pulled back the bed covers, I couldn't believe my eyes. Lying beneath the sheets was a mummified corpse. I stood there terrified, staring at the pile of bones and leathery old skin. The father approached me, hanging his head in shame. "Our son died 6 years ago. It was my wife that I wanted you to see," he said. Story 4. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved a search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking us why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of base ops, the woman turns to me, and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left the area that night. Story 5. As a ghost hunter who predominantly collects EVPs recordings, this case tipped the scales in many ways for me. I usually follow guides created by other paranormal investigators, but this case seemed to fall right in my lap, or so it seemed. Traveling on my way to another haunted location, my spidey senses went off as I passed a run-down farmhouse. When I reversed and stopped in front of the property, I could almost hear screams and growls in my head. Strangely enough, there were no signs blocking the entrance to the property, so I grabbed my equipment and went in. I found it odd that the majority of the trees and plants surrounding the old house were either dead or dying. The house itself also looked like it was decaying from the inside out, along with the surrounding buildings and sheds. As I crept up to the front porch, I saw that it was crumbling around the concrete steps that lead up to the front door. Stepping slowly and lightly, I noticed the cracks in the concrete and then the old boards nailed across the door. The disembodied voices started before I even got into the house. I switched one of my EVP recorders on, then I pulled on the boards, finding them flimsy and easy to rip down. The door opened on its own. Creepy enough, but I had to remember that the dangers were more than structural. I walked slowly, testing the floorboards as I went, but the familiar pricking up of my hairs and the chills hit me fast. Surprisingly, the center of the house was sturdy, so I walked freely into the kitchen and then froze in my tracks. A woman was slumped on the floor under the sink, with a large knife stuck in her chest and trickling blood. I was able to see through her, and I realized that I was in the middle of a residual haunting. But then she looked up. The pain in her face was horrible, but she managed to raise her hand and point upwards. Then she screamed. I looked around, but no one was there, so I turned back as I trembled in fear to see the woman standing up. Still screaming, she pointed up again. Her head began to twitch and shake uncontrollably with her mouth open wide. I knew that I had to investigate, even though I was nearly peeing in my pants, so I went out and ran up the stairs. When I got to the top, I heard the boards behind me creaking with slow footsteps. I spun around. Nobody was there. I felt like I was being stalked, but I had to push on, going to the bedroom at the front of the crumbling house. Again, the door opened on its own, making my flesh crawl. Then I saw a small boy lying in a pool of his own blood. I couldn't help the tears falling down my face, but I was distracted by a nasty growl close to my right ear. Angry now, I turned around and yelled, "Who are you?" But I didn't get a response, so I looked back at the little boy. He lifted his head and pointed to the back of the house. My head was spinning as I didn't know what to do. Then the boy sat up and yelled in his tiny voice, "Help us," while he continued to point emphatically and cry. I ran over to the room on the other side, feeling like someone was controlling me, while a chill ran through my body. When I got to the room, that door opened, violently this time, smashing against the wall while the handle rattled. A teenage girl was flung across the old bed, with slashes all over her body. A river of blood ran under the bed. Then I heard menacing laughter in the distance, which fueled my anger. The girl slowly sat up and pointed to the left. Her pretty face was littered with gashes and bruises. I was weeping angry tears for this ghostly family, who had obviously been viciously attacked by a sadistic killer. I could still hear the screams from the mother and the little boy, along with the gurgling from the girl on the bed. It was clear that she had her throat slashed, but she was trying to speak as she pointed to the back of the house. Feeling that I might find the killer there, it took some time for me to build up the nerve to keep moving. I was annoyed with myself for stepping into this nightmare without backup, as I'd never faced anything like it before. Then I remembered my video camera, so I activated it and pointed it all over the place while I continued on my way. The gurgling, crying, and screaming went on as I crept down the landing to the room at the back, shivering in fear. Before I even got to the room, I heard the slow creaking of the door, which made me shudder and move slower. My body shook as I made it to the door, where I expected to face the killer responsible for the death of this family. Instead, I saw a grown man in a chair with an axe deep in his head. There was a pool of blood under the chair. Somehow, I knew that this was the father, and that he couldn't speak, but he slowly lifted his hand and began to point. A chill swept through my soul as I realized that his finger was pointing directly at me. Was I the killer? As I thought that, the father pointed more emphatically at me, and the screams and noises from his family increased. While I stood there dumbstruck, wondering what he meant, I felt a blast of evil hit my back, freezing my body. Then a putrid stench wafted over me, and the father continued to point anxiously to the space behind me. Finally, I was able to turn around, as an unholy growling began to filter through the screams of the whole family. This time I did pee my pants, as I realized that I was face to face with the most evil entity I had ever encountered. Keep in mind that until that day, I had only ever captured voices on my EVP recorder. I'd never seen a ghost. Now I was only centimeters away from a murderous monster who had slaughtered an innocent family in cold blood. At first I had no idea what I had to do, and it was obvious that the sinister specter found this fact amusing. He looked like a big gorilla of a man who had escaped an insane asylum, with huge black eyes and an awful sneer. Then I remembered that I had a mini Bible on my keychain, which my mother had given me before she'd passed away. I whipped my keys out, and with trembling fingers, I flipped the Bible open and shoved it in his ghostly face. It was all I could think of, but it worked. I yelled, "Leave them alone. Go to hell where you belong." He screamed like a demon, splashed with holy water. As I raged along with the family's screams, he disappeared. I turned around, and the father was gone. When I raced through the house, I saw that the whole family was gone. The house was now empty, but free from evil. When I got back in my car, I finally broke down and cried happy tears. I wasn't even mad when I got back home and discovered that my equipment had malfunctioned, with no evidence. Story 6. This happened 10 years ago when I was staying with my then-girlfriend out in Texas. We were staying at this farmhouse owned by her father, hoping to get it back in shape after years of being left to the elements. It began stalking us almost as soon as we arrived, in that it took the form of a coyote and began following us everywhere whenever we left the farmhouse. If I went to the old barn, it was there. If my girlfriend went to the old well and pump, it'd follow her too. We didn't think much of it, assuming it was just a normal coyote that was overly friendly. I should have shot it while I had the chance. 3 nights in, and shit hit the fan hard. We were about to hunker down for the night when this weird, sickening scream moved through the house and into the bedroom we were staying in. It was almost unnatural in the way it moved, like the very sound itself had a mind of its own. Then we heard a knocking at the front door, and a thin, raspy voice spoke out. "Oh, you poor dears, I hope I didn't scare you. Let me in, and I can apologize properly." It wasn't a natural voice. It sounded like one of those old voice recorders where it's obvious it's not a human speaking. My girlfriend wanted to go see who it was, not wanting to believe it couldn't be anything other than a human. I stopped her and told her that whatever that thing was clearly wasn't human. I mean, that scream followed by that unnatural voice? Something was outside wanting in. She just looked at me with this face as she realized what I meant by it. "Oh, please do hurry up, dears. It's awfully cold out here." It was the same voice, and my girlfriend immediately recognized it. "That's my grandmother," she told me, "but she died years ago." We both started to panic when whatever it was started banging on the front door to the house. It was loud enough that it seemed to be coming from the bedroom door, let alone the other side of the building. Then another ear-piercing scream shot through the house, followed by more pounding on the outer walls and doors. We started to panic as we didn't know what to do. I thought about calling the police, but realized there wasn't any reception this far out, and there weren't any landlines installed either. Running to the car wasn't an option. We still didn't know what that thing was, and I didn't want to find out if we could outrun it. Then we heard a window smash in one of the rooms below, followed by yet another blood-curdling scream. It was inside. I don't know why I did this, but I forced my girlfriend to hide under the bed before running out of the room and down the stairs. Sure enough, one of the kitchen windows had been smashed in, as if someone or something was attempting to get through it. Below the smashed window was some table salt that had spilled over. It had clearly tried to get in, but I couldn't see it anywhere. It was only then did I see it outside the window, looking back at me. It was tall enough that it had to bend down to look through the window back at me, where it looked at me with the eyes that glowed a deep red. It smiled at me, showing its razor-sharp teeth, before speaking. "Oh, dearie me, I seem to have made a mess. Be a dear and let me in so I can clean it up for you." I just froze in that spot, scared out of my mind at this thing I was staring at. I just stood there as it tried to make another attempt at climbing through the window, but stopped as it noticed the spilled salt blocking its way. I don't really know why, but something in me put 2 and 2 together, and I ran towards it, grabbed the container of salt, and started throwing salt at the monster in front of me. It screamed as the salt hit it, and ran off into the darkness. Its screaming snapped me out of it, and I immediately ran back upstairs to make sure my girlfriend was okay. We spent the rest of the night locked inside the bedroom, praying it would never come back. We still have the farm, but have never gone back. Neither of us want to talk about it, but I just can't get that night out of my head. I am never going to forget what happened.